Good afternoon, traders. This is Christian from Hertz Tribeca Trade Group, and it is Wednesday, March 13th. Forgot what day it was there for a second. Here's how the indices finished up. We did bounce just a little bit at the end of the day. There's a little bit of a buy and balance, but I think a little bit of buy the dip going on too. But SPY finished down 1.8% on the day. Qs again outperformed a little bit, but still down 1.2% for the day. The real issue continues to be these small caps, down 3.4% for the day. I think they got down. They were close to down about 5% for the day, and they did come back a little bit. We'll look at that chart as well as we go through the indices in this video. And then the VIX, you can see I've got the VIX highlighted up again. Closed around like 35, got to around 37, I think, which is pretty remarkable. And it just always kind of shows how quickly this market moves, because I think the VIX was somewhere around like a 26, 27 yesterday. Why don't we start with that chart first for the day? But I think the VIX was around a 20, 26, 27 like midday yesterday, and to see it move up very quickly. So some of the things that we talked about in yesterday's video was that sometimes you can kind of feel, you may have a little bit of a market feel for when there's volatility that's coming back, but it's just very difficult to tell what day it's going to happen, right? We talked about how market sentiment got really over the tips of its skis, really ahead of itself, and this thing got down to, where was this thing? About a 26, 27. I think we touched about right around 26, and we're all the way up to 35. Now again, in the grand scheme of things of where we were in an 80, but if this was a move back here, this was a huge, these were huge moves. If you see something like this, again, we're kind of a little bit used to it. We've got a little bit of muscle memory from what we experienced about a month and a half ago, but that's a big move in the VIX. So again, if you've been trading now for the last few months, you've got some good battle scars, versus what we saw over the last couple of years. So, if you're now familiar with this volatility and can handle it a little bit better, kudos to you and learning a little bit. But again, pretty remarkable. Let's go ahead and look at IWM. I mentioned the small caps. I think this is pretty telling here. We've had this pretty pretty decent, move, and you can now draw a little bit of a trend line in here too, now that we've broken this, and I think this is a bit telling. Now, could we get back above this? We definitely could. All it would take is a day, but let me just finish drawing this line in here. So that's a break of the trend line, and it also lines up with the value areas. So to me, that's pretty telling that we've got that going on. So I would say if you want to be short the small caps, you could be short the small caps with a stop just above 125. So I don't think that's not a bad idea right there. Now that they've broken, right? I usually wait for confirmation. I know, I'm a little bit different than some people. Some people like to rely purely on their instincts. I like to rely on my instincts as well, but I like to have a level to trade against. Again, there's a big difference for me. So, this is 2 days. Remember, we got this big bearish engulfing candle yesterday and definite downside follow through. So you can look for this. This is the lowest small caps have been. We do have the 50-day moving average coming into the picture too. So you're not really late. You could also say I'll go short versus the 50-day moving average. It doesn't really matter. Whatever, as long as you define your trades either on the long side or on the short side, so be it. So that's IWM. Might as well talk about the S&P here too. This is also broken into value, and really the line in the sand, which we went over in yesterday's video, I tweeted this out last night as well, is this 2808. It's so funny because somebody, of course, there's always trolls on Twitter, and I'm used to it. I've always said I could take the the trolls. Really not a big deal. I've dealt with a lot bigger things than than these trolls on Twitter. But somebody was saying, "Oh, how could you think that that's support in 2808? We're going to just fly by that." Now that may be, this is short-term support, but I'll tell you, I don't see a lot of people, calling that out, and I think that was a good level if you were shorting, right? We talked about the 80% rule had triggered yesterday, with this bar falling into value, and the 80% rule is when you start a period either above or below value, and you enter it and firmly establish yourself, there's an 80% chance that you could go all the way through. So that 80% rule is now complete. And we were talking about that a lot in the trading room. I was saying, so again, it's funny how this always happens because I have a pretty good idea normally of what we're going to see, but sometimes my timing is a little bit off. And so I said in the pre-market session, I said I was not happy that futures were rallying, like we were bid up a little bit into the open, and then Powell started to speak, and we were about flat. But again, I always have like on my list going into the day what I'd like to see. So I was hoping that we were going to basically come into the session down like 1 or 2%, because that kind of brings out the buyers in the market a little bit. Or in May, it's not always it's not always 100%, but instead what we got was this weak bounce till till about 8 o'clock in the morning, and we try to fight back a little bit, right, till about 10:30, and then it was basically a rug pull. So we also took out this 5-minute VPOC. So again, I had mentioned this all in last night's tweet. I said, where could we possibly get to? And I said 2808. So what does this mean? Now, if we don't hold the 2808 in the over, and this is why I think this 2808 in S&P futures is important, because if we go back to the 1 hour chart, if we don't hold this 2808 and change, if I zoom out here a bit, there's just not a lot of support. Right? And I'll do one more zoom out. We've got this 2681. In the shorter term frames, there is a level of support on the weekly chart. I'll talk about that in just a second. But really, if we cannot hold this level, you've got a decent air pocket down here. So if you like to short, and I know some of you do like to do that because we do typically move faster on the short side. When things are really moving, we do move faster. When things are falling, stairs up and elevator down. The upside is more incremental. So I would watch out for that level, and I did try to do some shorting today. Got a little bit of whipsawed a bit, right at the end of the day, because it did look like we were gonna break. But this typically happens when you're using these value areas. Sometimes you do break through, and you come back, and we're either gonna retest and fail and move back down, or this level is gonna hold. I don't know. So and again, I try to go over a little bit of my thought process. I don't know if this level is going to hold. So what do? I try to be pretty lightly positioned into that. All right. So that's my thoughts. Let me go through those rest of the levels. So I mentioned this before we move, as I need to remember what level I just gave you. 2681. Right. If we go to the weekly chart. Right, this is also going to be pretty revealing in here. We've been in value now for the last we got in value here. So really this week I would say is the first week in value. 1, 2, 3, 4, and we're now testing. So 2774 is a big level too. But again, that's a weekly chart, and as long as we close inside there, I think full game on, right? I will continue to basically play this market to the long side unless this 2774 gives. If also that 2808 level gives, I'm also much more concerned if that happens. And then finally, just this level also lines up very closely with that 1 hour VPOC. So this is 2678. Oops. Yeah, 2678. Right? So you've got a lot of levels to kind of watch in here if we don't hold that 2808 level. All right. So again, all in all, this kind of moved the last couple days. I know it could be, when you've got your screen super zoomed in, it can be very difficult. And if your position sizes are not correct, you're going to feel it a little bit too. So, here's also, I think we went over all the major performance. I wanted to go over a little bit about like my thought process too on these days. I mostly, until this level gets breached, go back to this weekly chart. And you've heard me say this before on these other weeks, so this is nothing new. Until this level gets breached, this 2776, I'm mostly playing things to the long side. I mentioned how IWM, you could also be short, on the inside as price moves inside that value area. But until this happens, I'm still playing this market mostly to the long side. So let's talk a little bit about what all these guys have been saying. Right, this started with Buffett about a week ago. Now almost 2 weeks ago. We had Drunken Miller speak as well yesterday. He's been making some comments. I thought, sometimes, of course, the news tends to, and the media tends to overemphasize some comments, and sometimes they're taking a little bit out of context. But and then we had Tepper today too. So, these guys are pretty rational, level-headed guys. And I think what I took away from listening to Drunken Miller, and again, he's one of the most famous investors. He's got I have talked about how I don't like the term smart money because it's just used too much. These guys are Drunken Miller, Tepper, those guys are the smart money. So I tend to listen to those guys. Their track record is phenomenal. So those are the two those are the two main guys that I do listen to. What Drunken Miller said is, besides talking about the current environment and how it's a little bit crazy right now, the overall risk to reward is not good. Same Tepper said the same thing today. He's also saying that he's playing things on the long and the short side, right? So long short, and he does have a long short fund. If you're not familiar with that term, he has some bets on the long side where he's bullish and some bets on the short side. So he's taking some short positions. Hey, that's not a bad market to play. If you look at some of the sectors in the sector separation, right? It's the have and the have not market, which I've been talking about now for months, or for almost 2 months, I would say. You could definitely, and that's probably how he's been capitalizing on this market, is being short some things that are weak in downtrends and being long some other things that have some strength to them. So it's a nice way to kind of be also to be delta neutral. You do have to watch in case there's a reversion, right? Because we know that growth versus value has widely outperformed, and that made me concerned over the last couple weeks. But you do have to be careful of those reversions happening. So, and then of course, Tepper today. It was funny. Before Tepper spoke, we were talking about what he was going to say, and I said he's gonna say that this market has gotten crazy, and the word I used was nuts, and he used the same word because again, you kind of have to think about things logically. Of course, he's going to say that it has gotten nuts in momentum names. If you don't think the market has gotten nuts in momentum names and out of control, considering the situation that we're in, so. I think all these guys have said logical things. What they're doing now, there's no. I mean, I don't think Tepper was going to come on CNBC and put his neck out. Why would he say something different than that? And of course, I think these guys, just like myself, I'm looking for a little bit more of a buying opportunity in the market than this. Right? If the market comes in and holds this 2808 level that I keep talking about, and it's shaken out some of the weak hands in the market, and some of that crazy positive sentiment. It's a good thing, right? And I talked about that yesterday in yesterday's video, talking about these market pullbacks. If you've been doing this for a while, you know that the market pullbacks are become buying opportunities, provided that they hold support, right? And that you've got a nice level to trade against. So that's the whole thing. The other thing that I said in the room today was that, considering I'm mostly positioned on the long side, what I generally look to do on days like this is really not lose too much in P&L. I know that's of course a very basic statement, but really where I make the majority of my money is either when the market is flat, right? Because I am going after the outperformers, and that's just how I uh, am able to trade and capitalize. So I make money and when the market's flat. I also make I also make money, of course, when the market goes up. On the days where we get hit, my whole goal is to not really have a setback, right, and to be defensive. That works for me over time. Everybody's different. Some people can switch very quickly. They could be positioned long, and then boom, they switch and they could be short. I can't do that quickly. I'm just not, especially when I've got already. I do usually have some positions on, right? So I never. It's very rare when I get completely flat the market. I usually will kind of scale, right? So I'll usually have, sometimes I'll have like, anywhere from 3 to 6 positions on, and then sometimes when I want to get defensive, I go down to maybe like 2 positions, and or have a few like small positions on. So that's the whole goal, is for me to kind of like reduce my risk at the right time. It would be great too if I hit on the short side too, but really I have learned just to basically just minimize that risk once the market fades a little bit, and then try not to really give back a lot of the gains that I make in the normal markets, circumstances when the VIX is not screaming higher. Again, everybody's different. Some people do a exceptional job at capitalizing on market volatility. That's just me. I do play puts as well, but the puts are mainly to minimize, the losses on the longs. All right, guys. So that's it. In terms of option activity, also very interesting. Again, we started to see, like in the first couple hours, just the crazy like momentum call buying in a bunch of names this morning, and then that dried up. Right when momentum dries up, so do the call buying. That's just how it works. And then we saw we did. It was basically quiet through the majority of the session till about 3:30. And then we started to see a little bit of like small stuff, not any big size, but they were buying the dip just a little bit in things like Twilio and Microsoft and a little bit of Facebook. They were also buying a little bit of Citigroup calls too, which is a little bit different, and I think selling a little bit of Wells Fargo puts. I think there was a rumor about financial companies or something. I don't know. It's just a rumor, but we'll see if it materializes. All right, guys. So that's it for today. Hopefully, you guys have a great day, and I will see you guys back in the room tomorrow morning. Have a great night, everybody.